Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Rayhaan Moghul is the founder of Sidekick Accounting and is also involved in a charity called Global Village Education. Rayhaan has many other accountants in his network and is always happy to help newer businesses get underway. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, Rayhaan.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
Now, you run an accountancy business, which we'll talk about in a minute, but have you always worked in this field? Have you always been in accountancy?
Since university I have, so the last 10 years or so. I studied accounting for 3 years in uni. I did 3 years as a training, on a training contract to be an accountant. And then since then, I've been working either in businesses or more recently in my own business.
Yeah. So what was it that attracted you to this field in the first place? I mean, it seems to me that numbers are something either people love or they hate.
Yeah, I've always, I don't know if I love numbers, but I've always been quite business minded, and I've seen accounting as a way to really easily understand a business. So for me, it's the language of business. So I feel like I've always thought if I understand the numbers and I understand profitability and I understand cash flow, I can run any business. It just so happens that my first business has been an accountancy business.
So tell me about your first job after university. Where did you go from there?
So I started at EY, Ernst & Young, which is one of the big 4 accounting firms. And I went on their audit graduate scheme. So I was working with banks and financial services companies on their year-end audits. So they're very regulated. It's a very regulated industry. There was lots of hoops we had to jump through and lots of checking and boxes we had to tick. But alongside doing that work, I was also studying for my accountancy exams. So there were... seems like a very long time ago. I think there were 15 exams.
Wow.
Over the 3 years. So it was a combination of practical work experience plus time off to study. So bang on 3 years, I've completed the scheme and qualified, and I left because I realised I really don't like audit.
So where did you go from there?
So I transferred within the same company just into management consultancy. So that kind of ticked the box where I wanted to actually help businesses and kind of use my business mind almost. So again, within financial services, advising banks on strategy and operations and that sort of thing. Yeah. We didn't do much implementation. It was a lot of PowerPoints and presentations to give ideas and solutions, but not necessarily implementing those solutions.
And being self-employed, was that something that was always on your radar, or did that sort of idea come to you gradually?
Yeah, it's always been on my radar for sure. My family are in business. My grandfather set up a business when he moved to the UK back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of been around that. So it's always been in the back of my mind that I like the idea of going into business. I like what it can provide for you in terms of time and time freedom and financial freedom ultimately.
Yeah.
So I've always been very entrepreneurially minded. I was in school selling sweets, which is a classic indication of where someone's going. I've done eBay. Like when I was in uni, I used to sell quite a lot of stuff on eBay.
Yeah.
Rather than getting a part-time job. So I've always enjoyed doing something for myself and kind of having full control over how I do those things.
Yeah. And so at what point did you become self-employed, and what was it that made you take that leap?
So it's been about 3 years now. In terms of why I made the leap, I was in a job. So after the consultancy role that I mentioned, I'd moved into a building society to work as a finance business partner. So essentially helping them internally budget for a digital transformation. So building societies are quite old school, and they were investing a lot of money in releasing an app and kind of optimizing everything in the back end, basically.
Yeah.
So I'd gone from my consultancy role into that role. And the other thing about building societies is that they're very, very relaxed and chilled compared to the big four corporate life. So I was traveling a lot in the consultancy role, and I wanted to be more grounded, I guess. So I went into that job, and I found I had a lot more time and headspace to think. And COVID hit as well, so I was at home, and kind of all the stars aligned in that sense. And I started to then think, what's next? Because I was getting a bit bored. And I thought, if I don't do it now, while I've got no real commitments in my life, I'm probably never going to do it.
Yeah.
So one day I just decided to take that step. And then I think within a couple of weeks of making that decision, I'd handed in my resignation.
Yeah.
And yeah, then started on the business. And I think from that point, it took me, so I left my job after about 3 months, and then it took me another 3 months to get a client.
Yeah.
So there was 6 months of trying to work out how to get this business off the ground.
Yeah. So tell me how you came up with your name, Sidekick Accounting. Where did that come from?
So we weren't always called Sidekick. We rebranded about this time last year. The first couple of years we were under another name, which was Autus, which, to be honest, was just a word I had pulled out of thin air after spending way too long looking for a name. But what I found in those first couple of years is we were much clearer on who we serve and how we help them and what our USP is. And Sidekick, for me, represents kind of what we try and do, which is to be a client service business before an accounting firm.
Yeah.
So we want to stand by our client's side. We want to be communicating with them regularly. We want to understand their goals and really get involved in their business and help them to get to where they want to get to.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult to find in the accounting space, according to kind of the feedback from clients that did come on board. So it kind of encompasses our uniqueness, I guess, in this space and what the service we're trying to provide.
Yeah, good name anyway. So who are your clients? Are they small businesses, large businesses, any particular sector you like to work with?
Yeah, we focus on agencies, so marketing agencies, web development, PR, SEO, basically people businesses. And typically from maybe 250,000 turnover up to 5 million. That's kind of our range. They're typically owner-managed businesses on a growth trajectory. Maybe they want to exit in the next few years, or they have plans to kind of step out of the business but continue to take drawings from it. And they want support and need support in doing that in a sustainable and profitable way.
Tell me about the services that you offer to your clients.
We do primarily, I would call it an outsourced finance function. So we take over our clients' bookkeeping, payroll, credit control, invoicing, bill payments, basically everything that a finance function would do. And we do that for a fixed monthly retainer. So the client has predictability and they don't need to recruit staff internally. That's our core product. But then really where we add the most value is through the CFO support. So once we have that process in place and we know that the accounting is accurate and the numbers are accurate and we have good strategic plans in place, then we provide CFO support. So looking at the numbers and helping the business owner interpret them and understand exactly what they need to do in order to get to the next step, whatever that might be for them.
Yeah. And what difference do you make to your clients? What kind of feedback do you get from them?
I'd say the biggest one is it's not tangible. It's relief, I think. So most, if not all, clients come to us when they've probably outgrown their accountant and they're frustrated that they're not getting that support that they feel like they need. So we come on board and give them that peace of mind very quickly by doing a few things. Firstly, taking away that mental strain of thinking I need to, log into Xero or use my spreadsheet or update my spreadsheet that's not been looked at for 6 months. That tends to be on the back of everyone's mind. And when someone comes in to say, we'll do that for you, it's a huge weight lifted off their shoulders. So there's that element, plus the time saving. But the most valuable piece and the most transformational piece where it really clicks for clients is when we do financial planning. So really understanding where they want to get to. Usually nobody's actually asked them, what do you want to achieve with this business? Like, how much do you need to earn to live the life that you want to live? How much, or where do you want to live? Do you want to move abroad? Like, no one's ever gone through that process with them. So having those conversations for them is really eye-opening, and it kind of injects a new level of motivation within them. But also when you then take that goal, which is maybe non-financial, it might be that they want to spend more time with their kids, and you translate that into numbers by saying, okay, you want to spend more time with your kids, which means you need to hire someone in the business to replace you, which means you need to pay this salary, which means that the business needs to make this much profit, which means you need this number of clients at this margin. When you work backwards and you plot that out into like a step-by-step roadmap, it really clicks for people. And that's, I think, the most transformational and valuable piece for our clients from the offset. And then, when we start to track against that every quarter or every month to say, you've hit this target or you haven't hit this target, it almost like gamifies business. So they know what their target is, and they know a tangible outcome, that if I do this every single month, or I hit these numbers every single month, I know that in 12 months or 24 months, I'll be able to spend, or I'll be able to work, 5 hours a week or whatever they wanted to do. So it becomes really tangible, and it breaks it down, and it's far more manageable, and it becomes a realistic goal for them.
Now, I should think that most people probably start, when they start a business, they start without having an accountant, and they will start with a simple spreadsheet or something. At what point would you recommend people seriously consider getting an accountant?
Most people will start their business, and if they've got a spreadsheet, they're probably ahead of most. Because what tends to happen is they'll get a letter from HMRC in 12 months to say you need to file a tax return, and then they'll realize that they've not had or kept any records, and then they'll find an accountant that can do that. What point does someone need an accountant? It would depend on how quickly they're growing, I would say. If they have a side hustle, and they're starting off very slowly, you probably don't need one until you get that letter, because all you need to do is file a set of accounts. And if you've done the basics, like set up a company, if you're trading through a company, set up a separate bank account, and you've ensured that you're spending through that bank account and earning money through that bank account, at the end of the year, it's pretty straightforward, and you probably don't have a need for an ongoing relationship. If someone's starting a business and they're going all in, and they're expecting to scale pretty rapidly, and, for example, breach the VAT threshold, or they're going to invest heavily, and they need that clarity over what they can pay themselves, at that point, you probably want someone in, even before you've got there, because it's quite easy, and easy in accounting generally translates to cost effective. It's very easy to put those foundations in place from the start. Whereas when people come to us after, they've got 12 months worth of business transactions that haven't been looked at, that's very, very complicated to try and unpick retrospectively what's happened. So it tends to cost them more as well at the end of the day. So really, as soon as someone feels like they need that ongoing support, or they're doing something quite material in their business, whatever that might be, if they're doing it full time, that might be an indicator that they do need some support.
Now, I was interested, looking at your LinkedIn profile, about the charity work that you do. Tell me about the charity that you help, and what it is that you do for them.
So I'm chairman of a charity called Global Village Education. It's a charity that was set up by my grandmother's brother in their village in Pakistan. So he set up a school there a good few years ago on some donated land, with the idea of bringing British quality education to rural parts, not just in Pakistan, but globally. So his background was teaching in the UK. He was an Ofsted inspector, and he's basically built a curriculum and trained teachers out there to teach kids. Now, the issue is that most kids and families in these rural areas don't have enough funds to pay for schooling.
Yeah.
So we have a UK charity arm which raises funds to firstly subsidize fees so that teachers can get paid and everything at the school can be maintained and we can build new facilities. So we raise funds here to subsidize school fees. And we also raise funds to build new projects. So the project right now is building a secondary girls wing and some science labs. So we do fundraising in the UK, transfer that out there, and then manage those funds to ensure that they're being used in the best way possible. So yeah, right now the priority is to get a science lab built so the kids can start to do some practical experiments.
Fantastic. And so what kind of events do you run for raising money?
The last couple of years, we've not, since COVID actually, the physical events have kind of died down. Before that, we did an annual event, which had a really good turnout actually. There were some speakers and food and some auctions, like your typical typical charity event, which was nice. More recently, what we've been doing is more on the digital side. So we have regular donations from a lot of friends and family and our wider network. They tend to contribute, especially people that are from a similar area to where we're building these schools, because they want to give back to those communities. So we have a nice regular flow, and then we do other, like the website's being refreshed, for example. There's some blog posts going out, and there's some email campaigns running, which are designed to kind of prompt some additional donations.
So let's come to networking now, which is what the podcast is all about. So did you do any networking before you became self-employed? Did you do any on behalf of your employers?
In my corporate job, so in audit and consultancy, yes, it was very client-focused and team-focused. So Friday drinks or after work with the client were a must. So there was that element of socializing through work. In my job in the building society, not so much. Everyone was very family oriented. We weren't client facing. We were all everyone wanted to go to work and get home to their family. So there wasn't really a need for networking externally there. But I guess team lunches and meals and stuff like that were part of the job. So I would say quite limited networking in those roles. I think networking for me really became a must and high on my radar when I started my own business.
Yeah. Was it something that you started doing straight away? I mean, I know you said you sort of started 2020, I think, when things were quite restricted, but obviously there was networking online. Was it something that was a priority right from the get-go?
Yeah, probably the biggest priority was networking, because I started with no network in this space. I didn't know any. I didn't really know any small business owners that kind of ticked what I was trying to do. I didn't have any sort of connections in entrepreneur communities or anything like that. So it really was starting from scratch. And yeah, you're right. During COVID, that was a very different time, and it was very digital. So the networking came from sending emails and LinkedIn messages and just trying to arrange casual Zoom meetings. And at the time, there was a lot of organizations that had changed their in-person events to virtual events. So just trying to understand who was running what and attending those. It was a strange time, but it was foundational in terms of sort of having that core network that I think has helped me grow the business over the last few years.
Yeah. So how do you like to network now that things are back to normal a bit more?
As a result of all of that, the work that we do is almost completely digital. So we don't do any in person. The only in person I do is purely for I guess networking, in the sense that maintaining a client relationship, or just it's nice sometimes to just do face-to-face out of choice. But the business itself is all digital. So now when it comes to networking, I kind of still leverage those digital channels, but I try and do more face-to-face out of choice with clients. So we won't just meet for work. We might do like an hour of work together and review their numbers, and then we'll go for dinner.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have the choice to do that face-to-face stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess that's changed because it's not something I was able to do before.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of clients that we started working together at the beginning, so like almost 3 years ago, and we've only really met face-to-face in the last year. So there was a couple of years of complete digital interaction,
yes,
which has now changed to kind of more face-to-face on a social level.
Yeah. And do you network with other accountants as well? And do you see other accountants as competition or potential collaborators?
No, collaborators for sure. I mean, there's the market for accountants is huge. Like every business will need an accountant at some point.
Yeah.
Therefore, what are the chances that the small group that I do speak to are taking clients from me? Probably very, very small.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a few ways that we network, or I speak with accountants. The first is there's a few that have followed a similar journey. So I knew them in a previous job, and they've since gone out on their own.
Yeah.
So yeah, we might catch up every 6 months just to see how things are going. And that's nice to kind of get a different perspective from people that are doing the same thing. The second is through events. There's a lot of accountancy in-person events. So like Xero runs an annual exhibition, and other software providers and people in the industry also put on various other events where you can go meet them, but also obviously by default run into a bunch of other accountants.
Yeah.
And, I think that element of things is quite nice. And what I'm finding more recently is there's a lot. I've started to post a lot of video content on platforms like Instagram.
Yeah.
And it attracts a lot of accountants to me who they just give some feedback or they kind of express that it's something that they've always wanted to do. And then through that, you kind of have a conversation. Some people might just say, do you mind telling me a bit about, or can we jump on a call to chat through kind of how you've got to where you've got to? So that side of things as well, I'm always happy, and I quite enjoy speaking to people that want to make the jump. I think sometimes people need a bit of encouragement, and maybe they're not aware of what they can be doing. So I enjoy speaking with them, and they might grow to be a huge accounting firm that's a big competitor, but if they do, then good for them.
Yeah. No, I think it's nice to feel that you've helped people on their way, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Through that, we've actually I've started to work with some accountants on a one-to-one like consultancy basis. So there's opportunity everywhere in business. I think by opening yourself up to people in any industry and being available to people that do reach out, I think the opportunities come off the back of it in any case.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So my final question to you then, if people want to find out more about you and Sidekick accountancy, or indeed Global Village Education, the charity that we talked about, what is the best place for them to find you?
LinkedIn's probably the place that would have links to everything. So if you just search my name, Rayhaan Mogul, I think the spelling will be in the description somewhere.
It will, yes.
That's probably a place you can just click through and find all of the things I'm working on. I would say if you want to see some content and some tax tips, or you're just interested in business growth, check out my Instagram. Again, it's just my first name and last name. We post 3 times a week on there with some form of business tip or tax tip.
Sounds great. I might have to check that out myself. Lovely.
Yes,
Thank you ever so much for being my guest today. And the best of luck with everything that you're doing.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.